Good morning from the Edinburgh Fringe on what is going to be my final video of this year. I'm taking a walk. There's dear Arthur's seat again. The sun is shining. It's a little bit later. I guess you might have been up late last night. A lot of people treated last night as if it was the final night, even though officially there's another day here on the official final day where there are shows, but venues have closed, shows have closed, some closed 2 days ago, which creates an interesting question about what the 3 weeks means at the Edinburgh Fringe going forward. And the final video this time, wow, beautiful sun, is a little bit more about onward journey. And there's no straight answers to this in terms of your specific needs, but I just wanted to share with you some of the stories I'm hearing from people I've spoken to over the whole month about their intentions after the Fringe. And I guess I'm just going to step aside from going into touring, rural touring. There's lots of information about specific journeys forward and getting venues to book you, what sometimes is called up here the arts industry interest in your work, but to specifically think about other Fringe festivals after the Edinburgh Fringe. And you're going to go home or onwards. You might be travelling on, you might already be going on to another Fringe festival, and that might be news to some people that there are, even in the autumn, Fringe festivals to go to. Here in the UK, and I think I'm going to stay mostly within the UK on this video, but mention some others. We've got Camden Fringe, just finished, but some shows that only played a week in Edinburgh either came from Camden Fringe down in London or went back home via Camden Fringe in London. There were Fringe festivals leading up to the Edinburgh Fringe. I was at Durham Fringe with my own solo show, deciding not to bring a show to the Edinburgh Fringe, and there were reasons for that I could talk about in another video. But some had already planned several Fringe festivals to bed in their show. And if you're in the UK, you may well have played Bedford Fringe, you might have played Barnstable Fringe, certainly Brighton Fringe in May, Wandsworth Arts Fringe. There's quite a few round London, but they're spread all over the UK. Certainly we were getting press releases from Greater Manchester Fringe, and then people coming on to Edinburgh. And just be aware that quite a few people, I say quite a few, it could be hundreds, thousands of people with shows, don't come to Edinburgh. So they might come up to see some work if they can afford it, but they're just playing the other Fringe festivals. We go overseas, there were definitely shows only playing Prague Fringe, or smaller fringes, and then some were coming up to Edinburgh and some weren't. Often, of course, with reviews, which is a good way to hit the ground running at the Edinburgh Fringe. There are very few Fringe festivals in the UK happening in September or October. I think I've just heard that Scarborough Fringe is doing something in the run up to Christmas. Now, there are all the usual costs of going to those places, particularly if you don't live near them. It can be trains, planes, cars, buses. But the interesting thing in a lot of cases, and I was overhearing a conversation from a Fringe festival that was talking about helping with accommodation. Actually running after the Edinburgh Fringe, which is a curated Fringe, which means it's not open access to everybody, you have to apply. But Dublin Fringe happens pretty soon after the Edinburgh Fringe. And it's quite an expensive place. But I know that there are initiatives where you can bed down with another artist, and people have been doing house swaps and all kinds of ways of making the accommodation viable. Also, going off season can make buying tickets for planes if you have to fly, and certainly if you book ahead enough you can get that coach, and if there's a cast of you and you'll share a vehicle, I guess these are the ways that people go. But you can make these things viable, particularly by trying to reduce the costs of accommodation, as you have to do in Edinburgh. But the main thrust of just this little talk is to think about the end of the Edinburgh Fringe is the end of August, going into a fairly quiet period of Fringe festivals until the new year. But as you might find with Brighton Fringe, which runs in May next year, there will already be early bird deadlines for registering shows just before Christmas and then just after Christmas. And so part of the thinking around that is to think about the journey forward. Is your show now needing further development? Are you looking at bringing it back to the Edinburgh Fringe? What Fringe festivals on the way can enable you to test out that development. And certainly there are possibilities. So a lot of the fringes only run for a week, some run for a couple of weeks, which is a bit weird for people used to the intensity of Edinburgh, because it can be that your show in a smaller fringe that's running over 2 weeks might be the only show with a couple of others happening that day. But that creates the opportunity to build audience because you're not competing against so many other shows. Lots and lots of fringes like that are very glad to have you and will offer support. And it can be difficult to go into the flyering mode. So you really do have to make sure that your social media and your partnership with that fringe festival makes sure that people are aware of your show, so that you arrive in a strange place, not as a complete unknown. We could record some other videos on how to do that. I was very happy with the audience numbers that I got at Durham Fringe. I only played a couple of days. So look at the fringe calendar, look at all the fringe festivals, and there's a really useful website called World Fringe which you can look up, and it's got pretty much all of them listed, and that's where you'll see all of the overseas ones. But just staying within the UK for the moment, you can start to literally put pins on a map and say, well, go there first, that's 4 days. Oh, nearby there's a 50-mile journey to the next one, and create yourself a little fringe circuit. And there'll be different financial arrangements, just as there are with venues, in some cases with a really generous box office split. In other cases it may cost nothing, or there's a very small amount to pay just for the technician in your website. They might charge a marketing fee, but some of these are very viable. If your aim is not, we just need to tour, we're full-timers, which I completely understand and respect that career path and needing funding and so on, but if actually you probably might have another job, you might also be a teacher, and I've met a lot of teachers up here also bringing a show, and it can be a bit of escapism, but it can simply be that you're trying to augment one aspect of your creative life with another. And kind of the idea of being semi-professional or fringe work being part of your portfolio, and you might subsidize it, but it's giving you a creative life. It's allowing you to be, as we all are, creatively expressing yourself as individuals or groups. Then the fringe circuit is really interesting. And so I think it kicks off around March in the UK. There might be an early fringe festival there, and you can look it up. Then there's quite a lot in April, then it goes into lots in May, as I mentioned, Brighton Fringe. You can even pop over to places like Prague. But I do encourage everyone to think about the sustainability costs around that. But if there's a reason to be there, if you've got a particular genre of work, certainly some of the Edinburgh reviewers go over there to review. There are new fringe festivals in Italy just popping up, some have been around for a while. There's the whole Scandinavian circuit, but you can just stay within the UK, and you can just use the train network or the bus network to go around fringes, particularly with solo work. So coming out of Edinburgh and looking forwards, look forward to other fringes that may well build up towards this fringe, and you might just find you've got a bit of money in your pocket to pay for some of Edinburgh because you played half a dozen fringe festivals. They work differently. Some are open access, some have a lottery, a bit like they do in Canada, where they've decided that their city is only of a certain size and therefore your name goes in a hat. But quite often you might be able to get a last minute cancellation there as well. So you have to keep on the ball, you have to keep your eye out, but you could literally tour 15 to 20 fringes in the run up to Edinburgh next year. Very similar for you comedians. There's a kind of comedy fringe too within those fringe festivals, and things like Leicester Comedy Festival. Brighton has a comedy festival, and you can look at all of those in the run up to coming to the Edinburgh Fringe as well. So these are just a few thoughts here in the sun. I can hardly see myself on the screen. I'm not sure if you can see me on my final walk past my friend Arthur. So I want to wish everybody well in your onward journey. And just to remind you finally, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to come back next year. You don't have to do any fringe festivals. You might just want to play the fringe festival nearest to your home. But think about the onward journey. Enjoy that thought. It's a creative opportunity to continue whatever it was that you created here at the world's largest arts festival. And just a reminder, we've been making these videos all month. If you want to make a donation to Fringe Review and you appreciate what we do, just go to the website. There's a donation button at the bottom. I wish you all well.